All right, thank you everyone for inviting me to this great event. I know it's been going on for many years, and the energy that we feel here today is wonderful. The energy industry right now is obviously very, very exciting, and there's many things going on in the country today. Whether it's renewables and wind and solar, what's going on in the fossil area, my area of particular background in nuclear. There's a lot of exciting things going on in the industry, and thank you very much for participating in this. As Chris mentioned, my particular area is to run the Office of Science, but if you think about it very broadly across all of the 17 national labs, the overall budget for R&D across the whole lab complex is about $9 billion a year, every year. That's how much R&D that we do. And there is a tremendous amount of content that we produce across the DOE lab complex. The way I like to describe content from the point of view of the department, it is a mixture of user facilities, which is the very large and unique research complexes that we have across the lab complex, that no other place in the world has and no other place can afford, and that's actually one of the advantages of the department, is being able to put together these large facilities. Our second content that I like to talk about is about IP, and it's about technology that we produce out of that $9 billion a year. And the third portion of content that I like to talk about is the people, who are the leaders in the world in their particular areas. And as you probably know, the Department of Energy is the #1 funder in the country for physical sciences, and about 40% of all the Nobels have been issued in physics have come out of people who had worked with the DOE lab complex, and 25% of the chemistry Nobel Prizes. So it's a very important part. There's a tremendous amount of content that we produce in the lab complex, but that's not the only part of the DOE when it comes to innovation. We fund approximately $3 billion a year in grants all across this country to universities in all 50 states that people submit their requests for grants in our particular areas. And we have a very important part of that in which we help seed the whole country across not only our labs, but across universities all over the country, in order to fund innovation, to move forward the bounds of knowledge. So you add up these numbers, these are tremendous numbers. I think we make a tremendous impact within our own complex and our own lab and our own content as well as the university system. But ARPA-E is a very important part of that dynamic also. It's one of the reasons why that we continue to be a big funder of technology transfer across the federal complex. And if you look at the amount of content that we help move along with people here in this room, I think if you combine everything that I just said, our own complex, our work with you all, what we do with the universities, I think we are a bigger innovator than even NASA. And it's hard for people to fully appreciate that. There's a number of great examples of people here in the room who we helped fund and move technologies forward. I'll comment on a couple of them. Acades Power was an ARPA-E award winner on new engine hardware and design for pistons, in which it used a 6-piston design set in opposite using gasoline without any spark plugs. So much more of a diesel design, but using gasoline that improves fuel efficiency by up to 50%. And right now is being looked at for truck usage on F-150s, and working with Aramco right now on trying to move that forward. There's another team here from UHV looking at scrap metals camera system and X-ray system to look through non-magnetic metals and different alloys that historically was very manual. And using their particular system can be done in a much more automated fashion, driving down costs. And from a U.S. Economy point of view, moving forward innovation so that it can be done here using technology versus a lot of this being done in lower and lower cost environments in other countries. I want to comment to that particular point, if I may. As you think about the competitiveness of the United States, many times it's hard for particular areas of this country to compete with other countries on particular industries and particular segments based on cost. Certain other countries have advantage around cost structure, around labor or other points, which is hard for us to compete at that point. But there's one thing that we can compete on, and it's innovation. And it's because of people here in this room. It's because of university systems and partners that we have. I've heard this over and over again from industrial players, which is, why would they be interested in having manufacturing here in the United States rather than someplace, for example, in Asia? And what we increasingly hear is that being close to centers of innovation is becoming increasingly important for people in the economy. And so the cycle time for developing new products, doing new designs, whether it's battery designs or other topics, that being close to where innovation is, and it's not just at TRL level 1, 2, 3, and 4, but even when, frankly, you have commercialized production of a particular product, on moving that forward in terms of new innovations around manufacturing and new products of existing lines is vitally important. So the way that we can help move the country forward is exactly these sort of dynamics that we deal with here. Is how do we take the innovation that is in your minds, in universities that you work with, our national labs, places that we help fund, and how do we move that forward to commercialize? And that's why this program is particularly strong. I've been here a few months, and I've spent much of my time on the road, visiting our national labs. And in one particular area that I want to also point out regarding the DOE and the National Lab Complex is that basic research is still our core function, and it's very, very important to us to try to push the bounds forward on things that we don't fully appreciate where it might lead to. I think, as many of you know, when Rutherford was doing his work over in Europe, and he got a Nobel Prize in chemistry, and being a physics person, I find it a little interesting that it was defined as chemistry, that he got a Nobel Prize in chemistry dealing with what was called the disintegration of elements, which in that case it was dealing with nitrogen. And little did he know that he had basically discovered fission, and that a whole industry came out of basic research in a particular area that was truly scientific at the time, and it wasn't even in physics, technically. And it became the whole industry of dealing with fission. And nuclear is not just power. Nuclear is nuclear medicine and imaging and a number of other applications, oil and gas production. So that's why it's still important for us to continue spending money. R&D spending, obviously, in the country has over the course of several decades dropped, which makes it even more important for us to continue to fund, and we are continuing to fund, both within our lab complex and across the whole country. I think that one of the challenges that the DOE lab complex and innovation has is that very few people know what actually the National Lab Complex does, or that many people don't even know it actually even exists. I can surprise you with all sorts of people who you would have thought would have known what comes out of the National Lab Complex across the university system, and frankly, even people within the department don't fully appreciate everything that we've invented. We actually just published on our website that the top 75, if you look at the DOE website, the top 75 breakthroughs that the department has actually moved forward on. But I want to give you a couple of snapshots of some of the truly exciting things that you all know about that you may not know that the DOE lab complex has taken the lead on. The DOE labs were at the forefront of decoding DNA. The Human Genome Project was a joint project of the National Institutes of Health and the Department of Energy labs. It's a long story about why that's don't have a case to kind of go through that. But we were a major part of that, and we were also co-lead through our lab complex around gene editing. And I heard one of the most amazing examples. This is why it's important to have a big science, a big R&D budget, working on things that you don't quite know where it's going, because people like you take things that are embedded in our labs and or ideas that have even kind of come out of our labs and have run with them in a direction that no one would have thought. Let me give you an example that I just heard about. I was talking with an oil and gas company person who said, just kind of, without much kind of lead in, he said, oh, of course, we use gene sequencing for hydraulic fracture optimization of operations. I was like, how in the world did that happen, right? What exactly do you mean by that? And once again, gene sequencing came out of the DOE lab complex. And he said, well, what they do is that right now when they drill down through strata of starting to do production, before when they start doing a horizontal well and do a hydraulic fracture, they take snapshots of the microbial families in each of the strata. And taking snapshots of the microbial families, they gene sequence it so they know exactly what the genes are in each layer of the particular strata. Then they do a horizontal drill. Then they do a fracture, which up until this point, they basically had little direct knowledge of exactly how big the fractures were and through what strata those particular fractures went through. And so what they're able to do now is they're able to take a sample of the microbial families coming off of the production after they do the hydraulic fracture, and they could tell how far through which strata the hydraulic fracture happened because of the microbial sample that they took and the gene sequencing. And that's amazing. It's amazing that, of course, our lab people at Lawrence Berkeley had no idea when they thought they were working on gene technologies when they were coming up with the Human Genome Project. And instead, someone in industry has figured out how to take that and make it applicable to something that was never intended as part of the initial research. Very, very exciting examples of items that we've worked on and have ended up in the commercial space. There's obviously many other things that we've done in commercial nuclear in the past and so on. Let me give you another exciting piece of technology I think is very, very topical around artificial intelligence and machine learning. The Internet of Things is obviously greatly moving the applicability of these to broad sets of operations, and I'll give you a couple that we're working on in the energy sector. We and maybe people here in this room, but certainly our labs are at the forefront of using machine learning and potentially artificial intelligence for energy management around buildings. It's relatively straightforward as a concept, but especially as buildings get bigger, large commercial and industrial buildings, and frankly moving up to the layers of running a whole chemical plant or running a refining plant or name what it is, that actually developing algorithms, whether it's running a whole energy complex, we're seeing this with drill operations, with actually drill production, once again using machine learning and potentially artificial intelligence to actually manage operations for a particular drill, running potentially a whole refinery. These are amazing things that you're able to take the knowledge of people, but once again putting it into algorithm form, basically automating it and optimizing energy production, energy management, energy efficiency. And we're looking at this for national grids, for a grid, an RTO. Because obviously when you're looking at doing grid management, it's basically tremendous amounts of inputs around weather, including wind, and downstream use by another state connected to the grid, reservoir levels, tremendous amounts of data associated with it, which to a large degree is quite manual right now. And obviously using machine learning to take in all those inputs over history and putting it into a grid management system is something else that we're particularly looking at. So we think the area of technology, sort of things that you're working on, using your brains, using technology that's out there, obviously using some of our capital to help move that along, we find particularly exciting. So one of the things, just so you know, that we're trying to do actually is taking a bit of an example from ARPA-E is that it's wonderful that you all are coming up with ideas and coming up with content, and for us funding it, we also have content. As I mentioned, we have about $9 billion a year of content that we're creating. And should we be doing more with that? Obviously, the DOE complex has a lot of interaction with you all and others in terms of industrial partners. But once again, we're way undershooting the potential with the content the 3 points I was talking about earlier. So somewhat similar to ARPA-E conferences, what we're looking to do is to pick particular content that we have a lot of content in. And there's obviously many of them given the breadth that I was just talking about. And to do cross-lab, so rather than one lab, a cross-lab technology or market-centric events to do two things. One, to expose people to our content of a particular technology so people could learn about what we have, and then step two, and it won't be successful unless step two happens, which is for us to enter into cooperative agreements or work for others, which, as you know, are the legal terms that we use for doing joint development of our technology out of our labs, to move forward to help you and help others commercialize the technology that we're creating content on. So the first event that we're looking to do is we're trying to pick the most obvious one first in terms of potential interest as well as content, quantity of content and quality of content that we have, which will be on batteries and storage. We're looking to do that at one of our national labs starting in the early fall. We hope to have a lot of industry participation. We're going to do it at one of the universities. We're still tying down all the details, but we're going to do it at one of the universities that's co-located with one of our labs and bring out all of our content and hopefully being able in the areas of storage, whether it's multivalent or flow batteries or lithium sulfur, we have quite a bit. And we look forward to harnessing the knowledge that's out there and the energy that's out there in these particular areas and try to use some of the examples that we have here at ARPA-E around conferences and reaching out to industry and doing even more with the content that we have. So once again, thank you very much for being here. Once again, I think this is a very exciting time for the energy sector and for innovation. We're pushing very hard on trying to take what we have and try to work more with industry to try to move that forward. This is a great example around that. Obviously, the DOE complex has a lot of history of innovation. The history of the place is Enrico Fermi and Einstein, my favorite, Rickover, Lawrence, and a number of others. But once again, we at the department, can't do it alone. We need you in order to move that forward. We're not a commercialization entity in amongst ourselves. We need partners to be able to do that. And once again, I like to think about the point that Einstein said several times is that we should maintain ourselves to be passionately curious. That's what we are at the department. That's what we like about you all here and why you're here today. And we look forward to continuing to work with you all in the interaction with us through ARPA-E and elsewhere within the department going forward. So thank you for having me here.